I quietly left after discovering my husband relationship after years of marriage because of my mom. A year later, they both came begging. Imagine this. The person you trust most in the world, the one you share your dreams and fears with, betrays you in a way you never thought possible. Now picture that betrayal coming from not just them, but from someone even closer, your own mother. This is my story, a tale of love, trust, and the unimaginable betrayal that shattered my world. Stay with me as I unravel the events that led to the day I discovered the unthinkable truth. He cheated on me with my mother. I met him during my second year of college. He wasn't just a boyfriend. He was my best friend, my rock, and the person who made me believe in love again after a string of failed relationships. We clicked instantly, like puzzle pieces meant to fit together. He had this way of making me feel like I was the most important person in the world, like nothing else mattered when we were together. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We laughed over silly things, stayed up late planning our future, and supported each other through everything. When my father left when I was younger, it left a void in my heart. But he stepped in, assuring me I'd never feel abandoned again. But relationships take work, don't they? I was juggling school, part-time work, and helping my mom around the house. Meanwhile, he was just starting his career and working long hours. Sometimes it felt like we were barely holding on. But love keeps you going, or so I thought. There were times when I'd stay up late to cook dinner for him after his exhausting shifts, even though I had an early morning class. I'd surprise him with little gifts, writing heartfelt notes to keep his spirits up. I genuinely believed we were building something that would last forever. My mom, too, seemed to love him. She'd always say, "You've got yourself a good one." And she wasn't wrong. Or at least, that's what I believed back then. She'd invite him over for family dinners, and he fit right in, charming everyone with his humor and easygoing personality. I thought I was lucky. Little did I know, luck had nothing to do with it. Looking back now, there were signs, small things that I brushed off as nothing. A glance that lingered a bit too long. A joke shared between him and my mom that I didn't quite get. Times when he'd show up early to our house before I got home, saying he just wanted to spend more time with the family. I trusted him. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? One particular memory stands out. It was my birthday. He planned this incredible surprise dinner at home. He told me he wanted it to be intimate, just the three of us. At the time, I thought it was sweet. My mom had always been supportive, and I liked that they got along so well. That night, I remember catching a look they shared, a quick, fleeting glance across the table. It wasn't anything I could put into words, but it left me feeling unsettled. I shrugged it off, convincing myself I was overthinking. After all, I had no reason to doubt either of them. But the doubts didn't go away. They started to creep in slowly at first until they became impossible to ignore. At first, everything seemed normal, at least as normal as life could be. But then, little things started to stand out. I didn't notice them all at once. They crept in, slowly enough that I could convince myself they weren't worth worrying about. It started with his phone. He used to be so open with it, leaving it lying around, or even letting me use it to play music or make calls. But suddenly, it became an extension of him. He'd keep it face down on the table or tucked into his pocket, even when we were just relaxing at home. If it buzzed, he'd glance at it quickly and then lock the screen. When I asked who it was, he'd laugh and say, "Just work stuff." Then there were the late nights. He had always been a busy person, but now he seemed to have an endless list of reasons to be out. Work meetings, errands, or helping a friend. I wanted to believe him, but something felt off. He started coming home smelling like perfume, familiar, but I couldn't place it at first. When I mentioned it, he laughed it off, saying, "You're imagining things," or, "Maybe it's from the office." The way he interacted with my mom also began to change. They had always gotten along well, maybe a little too well, but now their conversations seemed different. Whenever we were all together, I'd catch them sharing these secretive smiles or laughing at jokes I wasn't in on. I'd ask what was so funny, and they'd brush it off as nothing. One evening, I walked into the living room and found them sitting unusually close on the couch. My mom was showing him something on her phone, and their heads were practically touching. When they noticed me, they jumped apart like kids caught sneaking candy. I laughed it off at the time, thinking I was overreacting. But that uneasy feeling in my chest was hard to ignore. Even when we were alone, I started to feel a distance between us. He was distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. The intimacy we once shared, whether it was a random hug, a stolen kiss, or just talking about our day, seemed to evaporate. When I tried to talk to him about it, he'd shrug and say he was tired or stressed. There was one moment I'll never forget. I came home early from work one day, hoping to surprise him. His car wasn't in the driveway, but my mom's was. I thought she might just be dropping something off, but when I walked in, the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I called out for them, and after a few moments, he came out of the kitchen, looking startled. My mom followed a second later, her face flushed. She said she was just helping him fix something in the kitchen, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. That was when I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't explain it fully, but the pit in my stomach wouldn't go away. The late nights, the secretive smiles, the unexplained tension, it all pointed to something I didn't want to believe, but I had to know. I couldn't live with the gnawing doubt anymore. So I decided to keep my eyes open, to pay attention to every little thing. And what I found would shatter my world in ways I never thought possible. The moment everything came crashing down started on a night like any other. He said he was going to work late, and my mom had mentioned she had errands to run. It was just me at home, sitting in silence with my thoughts swirling. That gnawing feeling of doubt had grown into a storm inside me, and I couldn't shake the sense that something was horribly wrong. I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed answers, but where would I even begin? As I sat there, my eyes drifted to his laptop, which he had forgotten to take with him. He always used to let me borrow it, but lately he'd been protective of it, like it held secrets he didn't want me to see. My hands were trembling as I opened it. His social media accounts were logged out, and I was about to close it when I noticed a folder on the desktop labeled with nothing but an emoji, a heart. I clicked on it, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside were photos and screenshots. The first few images were innocent. A picture of us, some work-related stuff, but then I found one that made my stomach drop. It was a selfie of him and my mom, her head resting on his shoulder, both of them smiling like teenagers in love. My pulse quickened as I scrolled further, uncovering more photos of the two of them, sitting too close, holding hands, even one where he was kissing her cheek. But the worst was yet to come. Among the photos was a screenshot of a text thread. It was a conversation between him and my mom. My eyes darted across the messages. Him. Can't wait to see you tonight. She's working late, so we'll have the house to ourselves. Her. I'll bring your favorite wine. I've missed you so much. Him. You're the only one who truly understands me. I could barely breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in. I kept scrolling, finding more and more messages, each one a dagger to my heart. They talked about meeting up while I was at work, sneaking around behind my back, and even making plans for the future. One message stuck with me more than any other. It was from my mom. Do you think she'll find out? I don't want to hurt her, but I can't stay away from you. I sat there in stunned silence, my hands shaking and my eyes blurred with tears. The betrayal was too much to process. The two people I loved and trusted most in the world had conspired to tear my life apart. I didn't know what to do. Confronting him alone felt impossible, but I couldn't face my mom either. For a moment, I thought about pretending I didn't know, just so I wouldn't have to deal with the fallout. But I couldn't live like that. I needed answers. I needed to hear it from them. That night, when he came home, I waited for him in the living room. My mom walked in shortly after, holding a bag of groceries as if nothing was wrong. The sight of them together, laughing and talking, made my blood boil. I stood up, holding his laptop in my hands. "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They both froze, their faces pale. My mom stammered, "Know what?" I opened the laptop and turned it toward them, the incriminating messages and photos staring back at them like a spotlight on their betrayal. "This," I said. "Everything. How long has this been going on?" The room was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then he tried to explain, stuttering something about it being a mistake, about how it just happened. My mom couldn't even meet my eyes. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, muttering, "I didn't mean for this to happen." I couldn't listen to their excuses. The pain was too overwhelming. I screamed, I cried, and I demanded answers, but nothing they said could justify what they had done. They had destroyed my trust, my family, and everything I thought I knew about love. That night, I packed a bag and left. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house, surrounded by memories that now felt like lies. Leaving that house was the hardest thing I've ever done. As I walked out the door with a bag of clothes and a heart shattered into a million pieces, I felt like my entire world had crumbled beneath me. The two people I loved and trusted most had betrayed me in the worst way possible. The first few days were a blur. I stayed with a friend, barely eating, barely sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, my mom laughing with him, the messages they sent to each other, and that picture of them together. It played in my mind like a broken record, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. The pain was unbearable. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, gasping for air, my chest tight with anxiety. I couldn't escape the questions running through my head. How long had this been going on? Did they ever care about me? Was I just blind? Or did they not even bother to hide it? I couldn't bring myself to go to work. Every time I tried to focus, the weight of the betrayal pulled me down. My boss called, concerned about my sudden absence, but I couldn't even explain what was happening. How do you tell someone that your boyfriend and your mother destroyed your life? Social media didn't help. Every happy couple photo, every family post, felt like a dagger to the heart. I started avoiding it altogether. Even talking to friends was hard. I couldn't handle their pity or their questions. I felt so alone, like no one could possibly understand the depth of my pain. The worst part was the guilt. As crazy as it sounds, I started blaming myself. Maybe I wasn't good enough for him. Maybe I didn't give him enough attention. Maybe I pushed him into her arms without realizing it. Those thoughts haunted me, dragging me further into a pit of despair. And my mom. How could she do this to me? She wasn't just my mother. She was my confidant, my best friend. I trusted her with everything. I replayed every moment in my head, looking for signs I might have missed. Had she always been capable of this? Or was it something about him that brought out the worst in her? I couldn't talk to my family. How could I? Telling them would mean exposing the truth and dealing with their reactions. I wasn't ready for that. I didn't know if I ever would be. The isolation took its toll. I stopped eating properly, lost weight, and felt drained all the time. Even things I used to love, reading, painting, going for walks, felt meaningless. I was just going through the motions, a hollow version of myself. I started therapy, though it wasn't easy. Sitting in that room and saying out loud, "My boyfriend cheated on me with my mother," felt surreal, like I was talking about someone else's life. But my therapist helped me unpack the pain, one layer at a time. She reminded me that their actions weren't a reflection of my worth, but of their own flaws. Still, it was a slow process. There were days I'd feel okay, like I was starting to move forward, only to be hit by a memory or a thought that sent me spiraling back into sadness. Birthdays, holidays, and even random moments would remind me of what I'd lost. Not just a relationship, but a sense of security and trust. What hurt the most was the silence from them. Neither of them reached out to apologize or explain. It was like they'd erased me from their lives, as if I was the problem they needed to get rid of. That silence felt louder than any argument ever could. But over time, I began to find my strength again. I surrounded myself with people who truly cared about me, friends who listened without judgment, coworkers who offered support, and even strangers who reminded me that kindness still existed in the world. I started to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I switched jobs, moved to a new city, and began focusing on myself for the first time in years. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of setbacks, but I was determined to rise above the pain they caused me. Even now there are scars. I don't trust as easily as I used to, and I still struggle with letting people in. But those scars are a reminder of what I've survived. They're proof that I'm stronger than I ever thought I could be. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Betrayal doesn't define you. It may break you for a while, but it's up to you to pick up the pieces and create something new, something better, something they can never take away. It's been a year since that night, the night I found out the truth and my world turned upside down. In some ways, it feels like a lifetime ago. In others, it's still fresh, like an open wound that aches when I think about it too long. But as hard as it's been, I've come to realize that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about learning, growing, and finding a way to move forward. In the beginning, I was consumed by anger and sadness. I couldn't believe they could do this to me. But as time passed, I realized that holding on to that pain only gave them power over me. So, I started focusing on myself. I began therapy not just to deal with the betrayal, but to rebuild my self-worth. I had spent so much time blaming myself, wondering what I did wrong, that I forgot one simple truth. Their actions weren't about me. I learned to set boundaries, not just with others, but with myself. I stopped letting their betrayal define me. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep. Mornings I struggled to get out of bed. But each time I felt like giving up, I reminded myself of everything I'd already survived. I also started reconnecting with people I'd pushed away, friends and family who had always been there for me. At first, it was hard to open up. I felt ashamed, like I'd failed somehow. But their support reminded me that I wasn't alone. Slowly, I started to trust again, even if it was in small steps. My relationship with my mom? That's a different story. To this day, I haven't spoken to her. She's tried to reach out a few times, calls, texts, even letters. But I'm not ready to face her, and honestly, I don't know if I ever will be. Forgiveness is a process, and while I hope to find peace one day, I'm not there yet. As for him, I've let go of the anger I once felt. I don't forgive him, but I also refuse to let his betrayal consume me anymore. He's not worth my energy or my tears. Looking back, I've learned so much about myself. I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever thought I could be. I've learned that it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. And most importantly, I've learned to love myself in a way I never did before. I've started to rebuild my life, one step at a time. I moved to a new city, found a job I'm passionate about, and even started painting again. It's not about erasing the past. It's about creating a future that's entirely my own. The scars from their betrayal will always be there, but they don't define me. They're a part of my story, yes, but not the whole story. And if there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away from this, it's this. You are worth more than the way someone else treats you. You deserve love that's honest and kind, from people who value you for who you are. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. So now I want to ask you, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted them the way I did? Or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments, because at the end of the day, we all face challenges that test our strength, our trust, and our ability to move forward. But no matter what, we have the power to rise above them, and that's what makes us stronger. As time has gone on, I've realized that everyone reacts differently to betrayal, but I've also come to understand that the way we cope with it can shape our future in profound ways. When my world shattered, when I learned about the affair between him and my own mother, I wasn't sure how I'd ever pick up the pieces. But now, looking back, I know that the strength to heal was inside me all along. I just needed to trust myself enough to find it. But I'm not the only one who has faced something like this. What about you? Have you ever experienced a betrayal that left you questioning everything you thought you knew? It's not an easy thing to go through, and it's a struggle I know many people face in silence. How do we rebuild after our trust has been shattered? Do we forgive, or do we walk away forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you do if you found out that the person you loved, the one you thought you could count on above anyone else, betrayed you with someone you trusted just as much? Could you ever forgive them? Or would the wound be too deep to ever heal? Please, share your thoughts in the comments below. This isn't just my story, it's something so many of us can relate to. And I want to know how you would have handled it. Would you have confronted them the way I did? Or would you have taken a different path? Sometimes, when we face these kinds of situations, we feel like we're alone, like no one could possibly understand the depths of our pain. But what I've learned is that we're not alone. There's a whole community of people who've gone through similar struggles, and by sharing our stories, we can support each other and learn from each other's experiences. So, what do you think? Was I right to walk away, or was there another way I could have handled the situation? Let me know your thoughts, because your perspective could help someone who's going through something similar right now. And if this story has shocked you, if it made you feel something, anything, hit that like button and subscribe for more jaw-dropping tales. I've got more stories coming your way, ones that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, trust, and betrayal. But remember, it's not just about the story, it's about the conversation. Your opinions matter, and they help all of us grow. So join the discussion, share your thoughts, and let's keep this conversation going. After all, we all deserve to be heard, and together we can find a way to heal. So, again, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have stayed and tried to work it out, or would you have walked away? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more of these raw, real stories. You never know. Your story might be the one that helps someone else find their own strength.